In 2013, in the town of Xinji, Hebei Province, China, a young man named Dan Pengfei showed up at the Lixin Art School to apply for a piano teaching position. His resume was so impressive it was hard to ignore. High school graduate from New Zealand, bachelor's degree from Peking University, fluent in both Chinese and English, with a confident and composed demeanor. With such a perfect candidate, the school hired him almost without hesitation. However, in early 2014, a job application email sent to McDonald's in Pennsylvania inadvertently became a stone thrown into a calm pond, stirring up ripples beneath that flawless resume. Following the trail for 5 months, police finally uncovered a truth that sent chills down everyone's spine. Dan Pengfei, from his passport to his degrees, was nothing but an elaborate web of lies. And the real face behind that fake identity was LiWei, the man who had committed a shocking matricide in South Australia 3 years earlier, then vanished without a trace. In Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, a city known for its relaxed pace of life and relatively low cost of living, on the eastern side lies a tree-lined upscale neighborhood called Burnside. This area backs up to hills and faces the river, offering a quiet and spacious environment. Many Chinese residents consider it a place with excellent feng shui, and it has attracted quite a few affluent Chinese families. In 2001, the Li family from Shenzhen moved into a large house at 61 Lockwood Road in Burnside, officially becoming new residents of Adelaide. The Li family consisted of 3 members, the father Li Jianlu, the mother Tian Hongxia, and their only son LiWei. LiWei was born on November 27, 1992, in Shenzhen, but throughout his childhood, he rarely had the chance to be with his parents. The reason was that Jianlu and Hongxia weren't just husband and wife, they were also closely bonded business partners. Jianlu had originally been a teacher, but later decided to leave education behind and venture into business with his wife. After years of hustling and struggling in the cutthroat world of commerce, the couple finally achieved considerable success. By 2001, having built a solid financial foundation, the Li family decided to apply for immigration to Australia through the business visa program, choosing Adelaide in South Australia as their destination. At that time, LiWei was just an 8-year-old boy, and he followed his parents away from his homeland to begin a new life abroad. Shortly after arriving, the couple quickly got to work on their business. They established a company called China House Trading, headquartered on William Street in downtown Adelaide, specializing in importing and selling Chinese furniture. To balance family care with career development, the couple made a decision. They would no longer both shoulder the business responsibilities as before, but instead clearly divide their roles. Jianlu would continue managing and growing the company, frequently flying back and forth between China and Australia. Meanwhile, Hongxia would step back, staying in Adelaide full-time, devoting all her time and energy to raising and educating their son, LiWei. This division of roles initially seemed like a perfect arrangement that met both of the family's goals. On Jianlu's end, his business was flourishing, with the company doing well. On Hongxia's end, she was a mother devoted entirely to her son, wholeheartedly caring for and guiding LiWei. Under her meticulous nurturing and high expectations, LiWei gradually grew into what appeared to be a nearly perfect child in everyone's eyes. He not only excelled academically, consistently ranking at the top, but was also multi-talented, particularly skilled at piano, to the point where he could hold his own solo recitals. So when he graduated from high school with near-perfect scores, his admission to a prestigious university surprised no one. From the outside, it seemed that apart from family members rarely having the chance to be together due to work demands, this family truly possessed everything people envy and desire: a successful career, ample wealth, respectable social status, and especially a talented son with a bright future ahead. However, no one could have imagined that hidden beneath this seemingly flawless facade, a time bomb had been quietly planted long ago, just waiting for the right moment to explode and destroy everything. In late March 2011, Jianlu was in China on one of his regular business trips. Beyond the difficulties and stress of business negotiations, something else haunted his mind and wouldn't let him rest. For several consecutive days, he had been completely unable to reach his wife and son on the other side of the world. Phone calls went unanswered, and text messages received no reply. This prolonged, unusual silence made Jianlu extremely anxious. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he urgently contacted a fellow Chinese friend named Mr. Zhu, who also lived in Adelaide, asking him to go to the house and check on things. Upon receiving the request, Mr. Zhu immediately set out. First, he went to the Li family's furniture company, China House Trading, on William Street, but when he arrived, he found the doors locked tight with no sign of anyone inside. Growing worried, Mr. Zhu hurried to the next location, the mansion at 61 Lockwood Road where Hongxia and LiWei lived. He stood at the door and knocked repeatedly, but no one came to answer. After checking back with Jianlu for confirmation and getting his approval, Mr. Zhu decided to climb through a window to get inside. What he saw next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Right in the middle of the living room, there was a mass wrapped tightly in bedsheets lying motionless on the floor. On the outside of the white fabric were splotches of dark red that looked like blood. Instinct told Mr. Zhu that something terrible had happened, and he immediately pulled out his phone to call the police. Several hours after law enforcement arrived at the scene and conducted their examination, they confirmed that what was wrapped in the bedsheet was the body of Hongxia, a woman only 41 years old, who had been dead for several days. The forensic examination results revealed that Hongxia's body bore a total of 53 wounds of various sizes, with the head having suffered the most severe and brutal blows. The victim had been savagely beaten first, then strangled with an object until she suffocated and died. Right beside the body, police found a metal rod still covered in dried blood and a belt that had been removed from a bathrobe. Additionally, the scene contained a plastic bucket and a mop with its head soaked in blood, clearly indicating that the killer had attempted to clean up and eliminate evidence of the crime after the act. However, when the fingerprint analysis results came in, everyone present had to take a deep breath in shock. The bloody fingerprints collected from the scene matched perfectly with LiWei's fingerprints. This meant that very likely he himself, with his own hands, had killed his own mother. A son whose parents had invested so much in raising him meticulously from childhood, who seemed to have a brilliant future ahead. How could he have been so brutal to the very mother who gave birth to him and raised him? What conflicts were hidden behind this horrifying tragedy? Through investigation and interviews with those around them, the living situation and relationship between mother and son, Hongxia and LiWei, gradually came to light. Like many first-generation immigrant mothers, Hongxia always carried tension inside her like a taut string. On one hand, she worried that the comfortable and free environment abroad would cause her son to go astray. On the other hand, she desperately wanted him to establish himself in this country, to rise up and achieve success in society. Because of these layered thoughts and expectations, from the day she decided to stay in Adelaide to care for her son, she gradually transformed herself into a true tiger mom, pouring all her passion, energy, and attention onto her only child. First, Hongxia enrolled LiWei at Prince Alfred College, one of the most prestigious and expensive private schools in Adelaide and all of South Australia. Under his mother's strict day-to-day supervision combined with his own tireless efforts, LiWei consistently achieved excellent academic results. He was even selected to participate in science and technology research projects organized by Flinders University, bringing home numerous prestigious academic awards. However, for Hongxia, good grades alone weren't enough. She understood well that the Australian education system highly values well-rounded student development. So she continued to pile more pressure on LiWei by making him learn various classical instruments, piano, violin, flute, filling up all his free time. LiWei indeed showed natural talent in music. Within just a few short years, he had mastered all the instruments he studied and even confidently organized his own solo concerts. Beyond academics and music, Hongxia also managed her son's daily life in extremely detailed and strict ways. From his daily schedule and routines to who he made friends with and spent time with, she kept close track and tight control over everything. Behind this plan to mold her son into a success was a massive financial investment that not every family could handle. Just the tuition at the prestigious private school, plus the cost of private music teachers for all those instruments totaled at least 52,000 Australian dollars per year, approximately 35,000 US dollars at the time. Seeing her son growing more accomplished and seemingly perfect, Hongxia naturally felt immensely proud and satisfied. She frequently bragged to friends and acquaintances about LiWei's excellent academic achievements and impressive musical performances. However, what she didn't realize, or perhaps deliberately refused to acknowledge, was that the heavy expectations and enormous pressure she continuously placed on her son year after year had quietly become the most strained thread in their family relationship. In the eyes of his friends, LiWei appeared to be a smart and sharp young man with a warm and friendly personality, good relationships with everyone, hard-working and practical, always putting his studies first. Even the principal of Prince Alfred College had publicly stated that LiWei was a model student and a source of pride for the school. However, there was one thing that, although LiWei never actively mentioned or complained about, everyone around him implicitly understood: the extremely strict, even harsh discipline imposed by his mother. That iron discipline had, on one hand, pushed him higher, turning him into an outstanding person in society's eyes, but on the other hand, it also weighed heavily on his shoulders with immense pressure. Perhaps because of this, despite always appearing perfect on the outside, LiWei often carried a melancholic, quiet demeanor, never truly carefree or relaxed like his peers. In November 2010, LiWei officially graduated from Prince Alfred College with academic results near perfect scores and was directly admitted to the law school at the University of Adelaide. Starting in March 2011, he officially entered university to pursue a challenging double-degree program while continuing to maintain his passion for classical music performance. As he grew older and his life experiences became richer, LiWei's sense of individual identity gradually awakened and grew stronger. Facing his mother's day-after-day supervision and control that never let up, he began to feel increasingly uncomfortable, stifled, and suffocated. In his initial thinking and imagination, now that he had been accepted to a prestigious university, he had essentially fulfilled his mother's long-held wishes, so surely he deserved at least a little freedom and personal space. But the harsh reality was completely opposite to what he had hoped for. Hongxia's strict discipline didn't ease up at all. Instead, it continued to pile on even more. Until that fateful morning in March 2011, all the suppression, resentment, and simmering conflict that had built up over so many years finally erupted violently in a single moment. Just about 2 weeks before the tragic incident occurred, LiWei had decided to join the university's martial arts club to learn self-defense skills. This was perhaps one of the rare first times in his life that he dared to make his own decision and try something based on his personal interests, not because of his mother's arrangements or demands. And surprisingly, he quickly discovered that he absolutely loved this activity. On the morning the incident occurred, according to the strict rules his mother had established, LiWei was required to sit at the piano and practice first before being allowed to do anything else. However, that day a fleeting thought crossed his mind. If he just switched the order a bit, practicing martial arts first and then piano, it shouldn't be a big deal. So during the time when piano music should have been playing as it did every day, he instead stood alone in the living room practicing martial arts moves. And right at that moment, Hongxia walked out and witnessed the scene. Seeing her son not sitting at the piano as required but doing something else entirely, her rage immediately flared up like fire meeting gasoline. She began scolding him harshly. All the conflicts, disagreements, and tensions that had been quietly building between mother and son over so many years seized this opportunity to explode all at once. The argument between them quickly escalated beyond control, with words flying back and forth, growing more heated and intense. Then, in a moment of complete loss of control with reason clouded over, LiWei brutally attacked his own mother. The tragic catastrophe had finally occurred, beyond any hope of reversal. After committing the crime, in a state of extreme panic, LiWei tried to hide all traces, then drove the family's Mercedes aimlessly around Adelaide for 2 days before disappearing without a trace. Through the investigation and tracking of the suspect's movements, police discovered that LiWei had appeared at Adelaide Airport on the afternoon of March 19, 2011, and boarded a flight leaving the city for Melbourne. Immediately after arriving in Melbourne, he contacted an online friend named Ji Xiang. The two had been chatting and confiding in each other regularly online but had never met in person. When he met Jixiang, LiWei sobbed miserably and poured out his stories about living under his mother's strict discipline, about how every time he tried his hardest to meet the demands his mother set, what he got in return wasn't recognition or praise, but only higher demands, stricter requirements the next time, as if there was never an end. What Jixiang had absolutely no idea about was that this young man sitting there crying and telling his tales of woe had, not long before, brutally killed his own mother with his own hands. After unburdening himself, LiWei asked Jixiang to lend him $920 to buy a plane ticket, and Jixiang agreed without any suspicion. The two spent the night together and then parted ways. The next day, March 20th, LiWei found a short-term rental apartment, paid cash for 3 nights and 2 days, and checked in. And in the following days, instead of showing any remorse or worry about the crime he had committed, he began searching online for gay escort services in Melbourne. On March 21st, LiWei continued browsing online and made contact with an Asian man, sending him selfie photos. That afternoon, around 4 o'clock, he brought the man back to his rented apartment. Later, when police searched the room, they found used condoms and other items indicating what had taken place there. On the 4th day, March 22nd, LiWei went to a travel agency in Melbourne and purchased a plane ticket to Singapore. Coincidentally, on that very same day, Hongxia's body was discovered by Mr. Zhu at the house at 61 Lockwood Road after he climbed through the window to check inside. And then something happened that would leave anyone who learned about it feeling incredibly frustrated and baffled throughout the entire investigation. Immediately after discovering the body and identifying LiWei as the prime suspect, Adelaide police quickly issued a nationwide alert requesting cooperation from law enforcement agencies to track him down. That very night of March 22nd, a border control officer on duty at Melbourne Airport recognized LiWei, who was preparing to go through immigration to board his flight, right at the checkpoint. Surveillance footage showed he had stopped briefly at the service area and the airport terminal beforehand. The border officer immediately tried to contact the 2 detectives in charge of the case to get instructions. However, of the 2 detectives assigned to the case, one had a dead cell phone battery, while the other had left his phone at the office. As a result, neither received this crucial call. Because the alert that had been issued earlier didn't explicitly require detaining the suspect, and after multiple failed attempts to reach the detectives in charge, the border officer ultimately had no choice but to let LiWei pass through the checkpoint and board his plane. In the early morning hours of March 23rd, LiWei boarded Singapore Airlines Flight SQ218 bound for Singapore. About 5 hours later, the plane landed safely at Changi International Airport. Only then did Adelaide police realize with a jolt that the prime suspect in the murder case had slipped through and left Australian territory. Immediately after arriving in Singapore, LiWei quickly contacted a friend living there named Mr. Huang. Just like Jixiang before him, Mr. Huang had absolutely no idea about the horrific crime his young friend had just committed. At 11 o'clock that morning, Mr. Huang warmly came to meet him and took LiWei sightseeing, starting from the bustling Bugis shopping district. Over the next 3 days, the two roamed all over the island nation, visiting everywhere from the lively Chinatown to Geylang. LiWei even stepped into temples to light incense and pray devoutly. No one knows what was going through his mind at that moment or what he was praying for. Was he praying for the soul of the mother he had just killed to find peace and rest? Was he asking for forgiveness for his terrible sins? Or was he simply hoping he wouldn't be caught and could continue his life on the run? In the early morning of March 26th, at exactly 12:05 a.m., LiWei said goodbye to Mr. Huang and boarded a flight to Beijing, China. And what followed was exactly the scene we mentioned at the beginning of this story. LiWei, using the fake name Dan Pengfei and a perfectly forged set of credentials, lived a peaceful life as a piano teacher in Hebei Province, China. However, a job application email sent to a McDonald's in Pennsylvania inadvertently exposed a crack in his cover, leading Chinese police to investigate and eventually discover his true identity. LiWei was arrested. After being caught, he quickly admitted his real identity without trying to deny it further. In fact, to gain more lenient treatment from Chinese authorities, He even proactively provided information about other illegal immigrants he knew. Thanks to this cooperation, LiWei avoided being detained and tried in China, instead being immediately deported back to Australia to face justice. On July 3, 2014, LiWei used a plane ticket purchased by his own family and boarded a flight to Sydney. The moment the plane landed, he was immediately apprehended by Australian police who were waiting right at his seat in the cabin. Afterward, LiWei was escorted and transferred directly to South Australia for legal proceedings. The 3-year international manhunt for the killer had finally come to an end. Given the especially serious nature of the case, as well as the high flight risk already demonstrated by his previous behavior, LiWei was immediately denied bail after his arrest. On July 7, 2014, the Adelaide Magistrates Court officially opened proceedings for this shocking matricide case. Standing in the dock, LiWei declared that he was not guilty of the premeditated murder charge brought by the prosecution. In the opening statement of the trial, LiWei's defense attorney tried to paint a picture for the jury of a childhood overwhelmed and burdened by an extremely harsh upbringing. According to the lawyer, from the age of just 3, LiWei had been forced by his mother to start learning piano. Hongxia was single-mindedly devoted to the dream of training her son to become a world-class professional pianist, and because of that, she was never truly satisfied with any achievement he attained, no matter how excellent. Academically, it was no different. If LiWei's report card showed any subject with a grade below an A, what awaited him when he got home was harsh physical punishment from his mother. After the defense attorney's presentation, LiWei himself took the witness stand to tell his own story before the court. He testified that when he was young, he and his mother had once had a very close and affectionate relationship. The reason was that his father, Jianlu, not only had a drinking problem, but was also prone to violence, frequently yelling at and mistreating his mother. During those times, his mother would hold him in her arms, and the two of them would cry together on the bed. On those dark and frightening nights, his mother was his entire emotional support, his only source of comfort. However, everything completely changed after his father once again left home to work far away. From then on, his mother gradually became more short-tempered and irritable, even violent at times. She began frequently hitting and scolding him over trivial matters, and the relationship between mother and son grew increasingly tense and distant. LiWei also mentioned that his English name, Daniel, was chosen by his mother on her own, named after her favorite actor, Daniel Radcliffe. Having to carry a name that wasn't his own choice, but rather his mother's personal preference, had made him feel extremely embarrassed and uncomfortable for so many years. As for the specific circumstances at the time of the incident, LiWei testified that on that morning he had decided on his own to practice martial arts first instead of sitting at the piano as his mother's rules required. This made his mother furious when she discovered it. He said that at the time, his mother was holding something in her hand, cursing at him viciously while advancing toward him with the intention of hitting him. Although similar incidents had happened many times in the past, he sensed that this time his mother truly wanted to seriously hurt him, unlike the previous times. In that situation, he felt he had no choice but to stop his mother to protect himself. As for what happened after that moment, he testified that he couldn't remember anything at all, as if his mind went completely blank. LiWei firmly maintained before the court that his actions fell entirely within the realm of legitimate self-defense. However, the prosecution delivered extremely sharp and cutting challenges to completely refute the defendant's testimony. Prosecutor Kimberly Pierce declared bluntly that everything LiWei had told the court was nothing but lies deliberately fabricated to escape conviction. First, she pointed out an obvious contradiction. The victim Hongxia's body bore a total of 53 wounds of various sizes, while LiWei himself appeared to have no injuries or scratches of any significance after the incident. This clearly did not match LiWei's claim that his mother attacked first and he was merely defending himself. Furthermore, the evidence collected from the scene revealed another notable fact. After assaulting his mother, LiWei had taken the time to carefully wipe the blood from the floor and wrap Hongxia's body tightly in bedsheets. These actions all required clear-headed judgment, calculated thinking, and the ability to act calmly. Things that someone in a complete state of loss of control or panic, as LiWei described, absolutely could not have done. When confronted with the prosecutor's continuous questioning about these contradictions, LiWei tried to offer explanations. He said that he wiped the floor because he was afraid the blood would damage the expensive marble, and that wrapping his mother's body in the sheet was his way of showing final respect to her. Upon hearing this defense, Prosecutor Pierce immediately fired back with a piercing question that silenced the entire courtroom. Were you wrapping your mother, or were you wrapping up your own crime? Not stopping there, the electronic data extracted from the defendant's devices revealed even more damaging information. Around the time immediately before and after Hongxia's death, the search history on LiWei's laptop showed he had looked up keywords such as where to stab someone to kill them instantly and how to evade police immediately. When questioned about these suspicious searches, LiWei claimed that he had actually searched for this information to commit suicide, not to harm anyone. He testified that he had wanted to do this many times but had always failed, because he was afraid of everything. So he had to search online for painless ways to die. When asked why he had hurriedly fled to China immediately after committing the crime, LiWei explained that at the time he felt extremely frightened, confused, and lonely. He just wanted to go home to be with his father and had absolutely no intention of deliberately evading legal responsibility in Australia. As for why he ultimately decided to return to Australia to face trial, he explained that if he stayed in China forever, it would mean abandoning everything that belonged to his family, especially all the achievements his mother had worked so hard to build over 20 years of effort in Australia. Additionally, his father Jianlu also testified in court. He confirmed that while in China, LiWei frequently visited the memorial garden where his mother's ashes were interred, and that LiWei had actually always intended to return to Australia to face trial, even having already set a date. On Monday, February 1st, 2016, after many tense hours of deliberation, the jury finally reached a unanimous verdict. LiWei was not guilty of premeditated murder, but guilty of manslaughter. Upon hearing that he had only been convicted of manslaughter rather than the more serious murder charge, LiWei couldn't help but let a slight smile appear on his face right there in the courtroom, an expression that made many witnesses feel uncomfortable and outraged. Later that year, on March 17th, the sentencing hearing was officially held. This date also marked exactly 5 years since the tragic incident occurred. During the hearing, the judge flatly rejected the self-defense argument that LiWei and his legal team had put forward. She sternly pointed out that from the time the incident occurred until now, LiWei had never once truly stepped up to take responsibility for killing his mother. Instead, he had continuously repeated the same lies and excuses. All of his gestures and actions throughout the trial showed not a shred of remorse or regret, which made anyone watching feel chills down their spine. The judge acknowledged that Hongxia did indeed exhibit controlling behavior and strictly disciplined her son. However, she emphasized that the degree of strictness was far from reaching the level of abuse that LiWei had claimed and exaggerated before the court. And regardless of what the circumstances may have been, nothing could justify or explain the rationality of LiWei brutally using violence to kill his own mother. Finally, Judge Kelly announced the sentence for LiWei: 9 years in prison with a non-parole period of 7 years. She also expressed that she personally could not understand why the jury had only convicted LiWei of manslaughter rather than murder. However, as the judge, she was obligated to respect the jury's decision according to the law. And within the scope of the manslaughter conviction, 9 years was the maximum sentence she could impose. Immediately after the sentence was announced, both LiWei and his defense team felt that a 9-year prison term was too harsh and severe. They quickly filed an appeal to a higher court, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, all appeal efforts were ultimately rejected and yielded no results. This is the story of a teenager crushed under the weight of his parents' expectations of perfection, of a family gradually falling apart in the endless cycle of control and the desperate longing for freedom, of a tragedy carried out in the name of love that ultimately led to irreversible destruction. And that's the case for today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.